you don't just wake up one day and be homeless. You know, it's a progression, just like alcoholism. You know, you have friends that you're staying with, and you usually leave before they're gonna give you the shoe. Tell you to hit the skids. So you kind of you kind of know when to go, and and being homeless is a full-time job. To survive. Um, and after a while, you become totally homeless. Probably for me, it took about 3 years before I wouldn't go knock on somebody's door to that I knew would let me in and get a shower and feed me. But you're just so embarrassed that that you're homeless, jobless. You know, Finding a day's work here or there. Get $50 or $60. And using that sparingly to survive. In the military, that you're taught to be self-sufficient. You're taught to be take care of yourself. That you don't need help. And and even though the help's there, you don't ask for it. Even when it's offered, you don't take it until you get to a point of desperation. And I got to a point of desperation in my life that one way or another I was going to die by staying homeless and an alcoholic.
One time I almost lost my legs in the street, sleeping across from the library.
Huh.
I went to sleep one night. When I woke up, it was snow. I was buried in snow,
Oh boy.
but I didn't know it was snowing. What woke me up was I heard a crack or something. It was my bottled water that was beside me. The bottle split, and I heard it pop. And when it popped, it made me, wake up.
Of course.
And my whole face and everything was covered in snow.
Or you came very close.
So I tried to get up, and when I did, I fell on the ground because both of my legs was pins and needles, and I didn't, at the time I wasn't even thinking about money. I was just thinking about just surviving from the streets,
Yeah.
So
Housing First is a complex housing and treatment intervention for people who are homeless and have mental health problems primarily, or have mental health and addiction problems, or are homeless families, or people that need help and are homeless. It's a program that provides the housing first, not because the program thinks it's such a good idea, but because it's a consumer-driven program, which means it's what people want first. So the first service of the program is housing. There's also a lot of service support for the people who are housed, depending on what their needs are going in. If they have complex clinical needs, then you need a complex clinical team to support them. Usually that looks like an ACT team. If it's moderate, then you might do a case management team. But it's those two components. It's housing first, usually in the form of an independent apartment in the community, and treatment supports to help the person after they're housed. The people we were housing came later to be known as the chronically homeless, or the frequent user of acute care services, or the treatment resistant, or
The treatment failures.
All of the labels that we have on people that we have failed, frankly. That's the group that the program targeted. Housing First, one of the most frequently misunderstood things about Housing First is that it's all about the housing, where in fact it's all about the clinical services. It's all about the clinical services because it's the clinical team that engages the person on the street, says, how can we help you? It ends up being housing, so you end up importing a housing component to what is essentially a clinical team. So it's all about the clinical work, because after housing, we still go back and say, how can I help you now? Then is it employment, is it family, is it medication, whatever it is, but it's the supports that actually keep the people housed. The success of the program is it's low barrier housing, but followed with supports.
I went to the office the first time, and they said, well, listen, we have an appointment for you to come in at Project Home to meet a guy named Adam, okay, and it's on a Monday. So I was like, okay, all right, I'm gonna come see what's gonna happen. I'm just curious. Yeah. So I remember I went in that day after he interviewed me, and it was 3 days later they came and got me, which I was shocked.
So, housing first, why? And there's really two main reasons why we've been transforming our models to really have housing first as the key principle. I think first and foremost is that the data and the evidence was clear. Housing first has been identified through SAMHSA as a research-informed, evidence-based practice. It is shown to be effective, most particularly for that chronically homeless veteran, the veteran that's been on the streets far too long, that has significant mental health complications or other disabilities, disorders like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, PTSD, that really limits their ability to sustain permanent housing on a long-term basis. Housing First was specifically designed to meet their needs. It's been studied. We've been able to demonstrate that we have housing retention rates in excess of 85%. 1 year after having been placed in permanent housing, and this is a population that for many years people thought we would never be able to house, and we're now showing success rates of 85% continued housing 1 year after the initial placement for a population that often would fall out of our traditional programs. I think additionally what we're seeing in Housing First is reductions in emergency room visits, use of county facilities, use of unscheduled hospitalizations, and greater engagement in outpatient care. So not only are we seeing better housing retention rates, we're also seeing better healthcare engagement and retention rates. But the second reason, I think, is beyond the data, beyond the research, it's really what the veterans want and need. For many years when we were doing outreach and you're talking to our social workers, they would always tell you the one thing that the veteran needed and wanted most was permanent housing. They wanted a home. What Housing First has allowed us to do is to change the way we think about ending homelessness. Rather than sort of starting with treatment and asking somebody to demonstrate their commitment, what Housing First does is it starts with the permanent housing, and then it wraps those essential clinical services around the veteran that helps them maintain the housing. And by doing that, by turning the model on its head, so to speak, Housing First has really produced substantial progress that has really contributed to the gains that have been made in our national goal of really bringing all these men and women home and really ending homelessness among veterans once and for all.
Not only is it the right thing to do in that we know it's right for children and veterans and men and women to have stable places to live, but we also know that it is the most effective and the most cost-efficient strategy to address homelessness in our country.
Well, when I came into the apartment, I looked around and I kept saying, this is an experiment and it's a trap, right? That they just using me just to see how my response is, and then they'll put me back out in the street later. So I came in and I duct taped all the alarms because I figured I know they hide cameras in those things, right? I did do that. And I sat there in my room after they left, and I just kept looking around. I kept saying, there's no way somebody gonna just give me a place. Just gonna take me off the street and just leave me with keys and just say, have a nice day. It took a long time. You know what I mean?
Just to trust.
Just to trust.
When she left, I dropped to my knees and said my prayers and thanked the Lord, because that's my biggest support besides my family and friends. And I just thank you for having them in my life, having the VA in my life, and the support of my people that's close to me in my life. And I just try to stay on the right track. I make meetings, because I am in a program for alcoholics, and I go to the VA for my primary care.
Right.
And I always stay in touch with them.
This is the first time that I actually live alone, and I don't mind it. They say, you gotta be careful with the loneliness and stuff, but right now that's not an issue. If it becomes an issue, I have the support network through the VASH that you know, that I can get the help